very much. Hello, everyone. Thanks for taking me early. So, as Michelle just said, I'm here to talk a lot about, we did really dig into the power of purpose and really look at how brands are moving from short-term campaigns to long-term commitments to issues that they really deeply care about. And I think we all know that there's never been a harder time to be a brand and to be putting out brand advertising. There's so much criticism. Attention is an all-time low. There's a war for that attention, and there's less interest in brand advertising than there's ever been. So this is how some brands are responding, and how you may consider that your brand may like to respond. And I'm not totally clear whether I have a clicker or they're just going to go. Just one sec. Oh, thank you. It's like we may be stuck on this slide for a while. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So the world is a strange place at the moment. We might as well just get this one out of the gate, right? We know we're going to talk about it, so here we go. So it is a strange place at the moment, and it's hard for people to find their way in terms of purpose because there's so much going on. Issues are more divisive. We see that people are more divided on issues, but they're probably having more conversations about them in social media and other places. But we are battling some things. Weather is more catastrophic, and the reason for that weather being more catastrophic is hotly debated, pun intended. And social activism is on the rise. So this is actually a good thing. You see young Canadians and young people across the world taking more of a stand on issues they care about, but it also means that for a brand to enter this space, it's a much more heated and sort of cluttered space than it maybe was even 2, 3, 5 years ago. And so, as a brand, or even as a person, you can stick your head in the sand and hope it goes away, but it doesn't show signs of abating, or you can do something about it, like Nike did. So you probably guessed that I couldn't do this presentation without talking about Nike. So this, for those of you who probably know about it, this is their Colin Kaepernick campaign, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. And really when this happened, they launched this on Twitter, and it was really a tale of two consumers. So you saw consumers taking to social media, Twitter included, and burning their Nike gear, and cutting out logos, and protesting, and sort of participating in that social activism we just talked about. And there's probably some worry at the boardroom table. You can imagine there were some very deep conversations about whether to launch this ad, I'm sure, at the table when they were doing this. But then we saw this. Nike scores 31% sales spike following the launch of their campaign. So one of the things I think that Nike does really well is they've always really understood who they were and maybe very, very clearly who their consumers are. And so they made a very calculated bet that their consumers would be on their side. But I think what's unique about this campaign is that they stood for something and took a side, and that you don't see very often, and that's also why this sparked so quickly. Because they stood for something, they took a side, and they calculated correctly that their consumers, the people that they really were speaking to, would be on that side with them. And then what happened is you saw advertising like this. So they saw responses where people were then sending their brand messages for them. So this participation in this social activism that's been happening on social media can work in your favor. It has its pitfalls, but you see stuff like this, and I don't think they could put it better at it than that. And so they just went out and did it. They were brave, they took a side, and they were fearless, and they launched this on Twitter, and it's actually been seen more than 35 million times on Twitter. So Twitter is a place where that purpose can travel, and where people will have that conversation, and so it's an important part of the mix. So, consumers do want brands that share their values. They want to know where you stand on big issues, and they may make their decisions with their wallet based on how you show up here. And it's not just a feeling. There's evidence that shows that this is actually true. So let's look at some of it. 75% of people expect brands to make a contribution to their well-being and quality of life. That's actually a pretty big ask. Your well-being and quality of life. So make my life easier, make it better. When people ask you, like, what's the best app you have on your phone? I bet you it's the app that makes something easier, more convenient, more simple to use. Actually, one of my favorite apps is the Green Pea Parking app. I love the Green Pea Parking app because I never get tickets anymore because I have my app and it tells me when I'm expiring and I can update it. I don't have to run back in the rain, which I got a lot of tickets for in the past. Full disclosure. What else? 57% of people will buy or boycott a brand based on its position on a social or political issue. That's also, so people are buying, they're buying based on your beliefs and they're voting with their wallet in a lot of cases. So this is super important, and Nike calculated this very, very well, and it's had an amazing impact for them. And then lastly, 30% of brands are buying or boycotting more than they were a year ago. So back to my earlier point around social activism, people are making more of their decisions based on this than we've ever seen them make. And that is pretty perilous for a brand if you've never come out and spoken up around what you believe in and what your values are. And so there are a lot of brands doing soul searching around, well, what do we want to stand for? And can we stand for something without being on one side or the other? Those are questions that you should be having if you're not at the table in your corporation, in your organization. So Twitter is a place where purpose travels. I've said that already. So we know that that people really take to Twitter. They use it to broadcast, obviously, and you can get responses. And the power of Twitter is that it's what's happening in the world, but without as many barriers as you may see on your other social platforms. So this is a place where purpose really travels. Because it is what's happening in the world and what people are talking about. And so when a brand wants to get out and talk to their consumers, it's a different mindset when they want to get out and tell something to their consumers, and they use different mediums. So you see Nike launched on Twitter, but then quickly was on television and other places, but they launch with an audience that they think will engage quickly, and then they move to other mediums, which you'll see as I talk about different brands and how they use different social channels. So hopefully this will work. Watch a quick video. So what makes things travel in social media and on Twitter specifically usually is the hashtag. So the story of the hashtag is 11 years old, which feels like maybe it's a lot younger or maybe a lot older, can't quite decide. But the backstory is that apparently in the very early days, just after they launched Twitter, Jack and Biz were apparently busy dealing with one of the many crashes that they were having from a server perspective. And one of their colleagues, Adam Messina, came in and said, hey, I have this idea about trying to group conversations together on Twitter. And they were kind of like, yeah, sounds good, but we can't deal with that right now. And he said, what if we grouped subjects with the pound symbol, the hash symbol? And they said, great, sure, sounds okay. And really, not a lot of thought went into it. And then a week later, he announced on Twitter, hey, we've got this great new way of grouping subjects under the pound symbol. Please use it when you're talking about things. And the hashtag was born. And so the hashtag has a lot of inherent power around purpose and around all different types of conversations. So we're going to look at a fun example. Whoops. Uh-oh, sorry. About the power of a hashtag. So this is a little bit of an older example, but you all remember the women's marches on Washington. So this is a woman, her name is Andrea. She has about 1,730 followers on Twitter, so not huge, not totally small, but not enormous. And she was going to Washington for the Women's March. So she gets on the plane, and she says, I'm boarding a plane. The woman on the plane says, anyone here going to the march? 75% of the plane, yes. And she says, you know, hashtag Women's March on Washington, which was the hashtag they were being used. And then she adds, hashtag plane full of nasty, let's get plane full of nasty women trending. So you remember the nasty woman comment from the debates. And so, you know, she kind of gives this tweet storm about things that are going on. Correction, 90% of the flight is headed to the Women's March on Washington, plane full of nasty women. And, like most people on a plane, she then immediately turns off her Wi-Fi and puts her phone on airplane mode and carries on the flight to Washington. Some of us get Wi-Fi. I don't like getting Wi-Fi on the plane because I like to use it as an excuse for I'm unavailable. Please don't contact me because I work at Twitter, and so it's always easy to get a hold of me. But so she does what she's supposed to do. She goes, she has a quiet time on the plane, and she arrives. This guy retweets or replies to her mother's daughters, aunts, and nieces, love me some, hashtag nasty woman. She gets off the plane, she gets a taxi, she goes to her hotel, she connects to hotel Wi-Fi. Her phone has blown up. She's got hundreds and hundreds of retweets. She's got media requests asking if they can have permission to use her tweet because she set this hashtag in motion, and then all of the different flights of women going to Washington started to take up this hashtag, and her purpose traveled on Twitter, and all of a sudden she had a moment of Twitter fame. So that is the simple power of a hashtag. It can really spark a movement, it can spark conversation, it can spark something fun. We all know that sometimes it sparks, you know, a lot of viewing of funny cat videos, but other times it's more important. Here's another really interesting thing that travels. So we, the students, do not consent is the hashtag. On September 21st, we reported that an estimated 38,000 Ontario students participated in a walkout protest. That's a lot. So this was the hashtag that they used, and this, Rain Fisher Kwan, this is the 17-year-old who organized this. So she's got a few hundred followers, but the Toronto Star published an article about how she was organizing this. Different people were retweeting her. She was active on Twitter. And then this guy, Peter C., who I think now regrets maybe some of his words, he replies to her in the Toronto Star. So Toronto Star has roughly 1 million followers. This is a big audience she's speaking to. Says, how about walking into math class once in a while? And she says, hey, not sure if you read the article, but I attend one of the most prestigious advanced math and science programs in the TDSB. I plan on going to MIT for a degree in theoretical physics. I can assure you I've been walking into math class. And what did I want to write back? Yes! She's 17, and this is her purpose, and this is how it traveled. Now, she had some help from the Toronto Star and some accounts with some big followers, but this is an amazing way for the youth to get out their power of purpose, and in some cases, maybe not specifically this one, for brands to get on board in that conversation. What's next? Okay, here's a good one. Apology, there's some profanity, but you've seen this one circulating around Twitter. Get in my lane. So the NRA sends out this tweet saying that the doctors who are treating gunshot victims should stay in their lane. So hashtag stay in your lane starts to trend. And I won't read the exact thing, but so a whole bunch of doctors have started to respond to this and hashtag stay in my lane. So do you have any idea how many bullets I pull out of Corpses Weekly? This isn't my lane, it's my highway. Don't know if I'm allowed to swear here. But you are on Twitter. So this is amazing. These are just doctors. And so this 478,000 likes, 478,000, 144,000 retweets. Here's another one. Can't post a patient photo, so this is a selfie. This is what it looks like to stay in my lane. 94,000 likes, 32,000 retweets. These are doctors. I'm confident that before now they didn't have a really robust Twitter following. Good morning. Just a reminder at NRA, this is my lane. This is our lane. she didn't make it. So there, if you want, like, it's quite heart-wrenching, this hashtag, but this is the power of purpose and the power of a hashtag to spark a movement and to drive conversation from all over the world, because with these kinds of numbers, it's big. And this is obviously a very big and sensitive conversation, but this is a way for people to express themselves, and the hashtag is really driving that. Here's one that's a little bit personal for me. This is, for Indigenous History Month, we work with a number of Indigenous artists and activists, and one of the things that we did was we spoke with Chief Ladybird, who's an Anishinaabe artist and activist, and we asked her to design a custom emoji. So everybody knows what an emoji is. If you use a hashtag, it will spontaneously create that emoji. Amazingly enough, we actually create those at Twitter behind the scenes, and it's very exciting. I don't know if you recently saw that on Halloween, hashtag Happy Halloween, and then the pumpkin, the like button would turn into a fun pumpkin face. So fun stuff that we do in the background. So she created this custom emoji for Indigenous Peoples Day, and she tweeted out about it. And then later, she was named to landed a spot on How I Made It 2018 from Flair magazine. And so then she tweeted it out, and she said, you know, her big break, designing the Turtle Island Twitter emoji. So a really great story around something that started as a fairly grassroots movement for us to just show important conversations on the platform, to a lot of sort of the progress of that and how she's been recognized and in a lot of mainstream media around the things that she's doing, not only designing the emoji, but other things. So this is a fun one for me. And then I'm tweeting. So proud to have been a part of this. So that's the power of a hashtag. And so it's easy to see it after it happens, obviously. You're like, oh, that one's trending, wow. But as a brand, you kind of have to get your stuff together in the background. You can't just sort of jump in willy-nilly to these conversations, because they can be quite heated. So how do you think about purpose? So we think about it in these three ways. A little formatting issue. Products, principles, and your pledge. So products, what fuels you? Like what do you sell? What do you own? In Nike's case, of course, it's a mantra for just do it, and partly it's products. What are your principles? So what do you believe in? And Nike very clearly understood what they believed in that example, and went out and stood for it. And then pledge is really what invites other people to join in. And this is very specific to social, because you don't want to just say we believe it. You want to say let's believe it, or let's drive this belief or drive this change. In Nike's case, of course, they have an iconic "Just Do It," which is a very inclusive statement, so that they were able to do that. In other cases, for brands that don't have as much of a call to action, sort of as part of how they talk about their brand, they have to think about what would they invite people to do. So I'm going to take you through a few examples. We'll do like a pop quiz. I'm going to do the pledge and the principles, and you guys see if you can guess what brand it is before I reveal it, unless the animation doesn't work, then that'll be bad. Okay, so we'll start. So this year, CES, show of hands, people know what CES is, Consumer Electronics Show that happens in January. So this is 2018. For the second year in a row, CES won't feature any female keynote speakers. Wow. Feels shocking. So, what happened? Well, there was a product, and it was a platform for free expression and empowerment. The principles that brand held dear: see every side, hear all voices. And the pledge was to bring women into the conversation in tech. So here's Leslie Berlin. She's the CMO of Twitter and my boss. And she just sends a tweet. Now she's got a big following and a big voice on Twitter. But hey, CS, big respect for what you built, but please do better here. I've got a long list of amazing women to hit your stage. Let's talk. # change the ratio. Now, interestingly, CES, instead of jumping on this opportunity and kind of collaborating, kind of said, hey, thanks for your feedback, but we couldn't find any women to do this, so we're just going to carry on the way we are. So people started to get on this and say, calling all my advertising friends to express your thoughts, and people started to say, like, hey, we want to hear from you, speak out, this is not okay. And so what did we at Twitter do? We could have just said, oh, well, send a tweet. But we really believe in this, and we have a female CMO, and so we built our own stage. and we hosted it at CES, and guess what? Only women appeared on that stage. And guess what? CIOs, CMOs, CTOs. What are the other C's? And they had an amazing conversation about being a woman leader in tech. And guess what? Millions and millions of people tuned in to watch it live on Twitter. And it was a big success, and we'll carry on. So that was a moment in time, and it was a big moment in time, and we felt very proud of it. We said, but how do we keep the conversation going? So we launched this hashtag as part of that event and carried it on, #HereWeAre. So it's like, hi, here we are, the women leaders that can speak on these issues, the CIOs, CTOs, and CMOs. And then we carried that forward, so the Oscars was on the Sunday right before International Women's Day, which happened on Thursday, the 8th of March. And so we launched a spot across North America to celebrate this hashtag during the Oscars broadcast. And we sent out this tweet. We stand with women around the world to make their voices heard and their presence known, to bring them front and center today and every day. Join us as we say, here we are. And we worked with this poet, Denise Frohman. This is a conversation card. If people are not familiar with it, you create it in our ad interface, and this button allows to pre-compose the tweet, and it's a really good way to get people to just, sometimes the burden of saying something is hard for people, so you pre-compose that tweet. So this tweet started with #HereWeAre, and I could tweet and say, I'm here to show my daughter that she can do anything, and you could tweet that you're here to show women in STEM what you believe in, or anything you stood for, you could say #HereWeAre. And here's our spot.
I heard a woman becomes herself the first time she speaks without permission. Then every word out her mouth a riot. Say beautiful and point to the map of your body. Say brave and wear your skin like a gown or a suit. Say hero and cast yourself in the lead role. When a girl pronounces her own name, there is glory. When a woman tells her own story, she lives forever. If this poem is the only thing that survives me, tell them this is how I happened. Tell them I built me a throne. Tell them when we discovered life on another planet, it was a woman, and she built a bridge, not a border. I heard this is how you make history. This is how you create a new world.
So we ran that in the very first 40 minutes of the Oscars broadcast in Canada and the US. It's a really proud moment. I don't know if you caught that in there, but you see Ava DuVernay featured in that ad. So she was really a big supporter of this and continues to be a big supporter of these types of things on Twitter. It was a great moment, but it also was just a spot in a TV commercial. So what did we do? Well, in Canada, we reached out to women that we thought were making a difference in our communities, and we asked them to participate in a photo shoot and to be part of the Here We Are movement in Canada, and we asked them to tweet it out on International Women's Day. So this is Cindy Blackstock, and I'm just going to look at my notes so I get everybody's titles exactly right, but she's a Canadian-born Jixon child welfare activist. She's the executive director of the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society of Canada, and she came forward and said, here we are. And people, they all tweeted something personal about how they were feeling. This is Asma Malik. She is a trustee for the TDSV. She's Canada's first ever hijab-wearing elected official. She was also planning to run for city council before some of the changes that happened were made, so that was also something that was big on Twitter. And she's standing up for what she believes in and saying, here we are. This is Lisa Milburn. She is the CMO of BMO Wealth Management. So companies are standing up, and she's also the lead sponsor for their BMO for Women initiative. And she came out and stood up for who they want to be and who she wants her women to stand for. This is Kristen Wong-Tam, who I'm sure many of you know. She's a city councillor in Toronto. And she said, to all the smart and strong little girls in the world, remember this. No one can ever call you anything that you're not. You're powerful and so much more. So people came out and they told amazing stories and really shared amazing things. We had Clara Hughes come out and do this. We had a number of different women from different walks of life. This is Nan Kiwanuka. She is a Ugandan-Canadian TV personality and journalist. You may see her on TVO from time to time. And she came out and talked about this. I was told at a young age that because I was an African girl, I wouldn't amount to anything. From living in a refugee camp to working in a male-dominated spaces in music and sports, I persisted. And I'm thankful to the men and women who held me up along the way. Here we are. So we got out and did something very local and very sort of in the moment. And then we didn't stop there. We've hosted Here We Are events where we've invited different women leaders to come. We hosted this in Toronto. Our CMO, Leslie Berlin, came to host it. So I think there are lots of different ways. You don't have to do everything. Like sometimes the goal is you want to start and spark the conversation on social media. Twitter's a great place to do that. And then you take it to different places. We took it to television. We took it, of course, we spent a lot of time on platform because we are Twitter. But we took it to television. We took it to events. We took it to different communities and really talked about what we believe in, and we'll continue to take that. So that's one example. And I would say the other thing that's important to note is we didn't have million-dollar personalities to endorse this. Certainly in Canada, I didn't. And it doesn't always have to be as big as the Colin Kaepernick, although, you know, it wouldn't be bad to have one of those once in a while. So whether it's like a very simple brand statement, this is Airbnb after the very controversial Muslim ban in the US, very simple, just statement of what they believed in, to just a statement around human nature. This is actually one of the most retweeted tweets of all time. Not surprisingly, no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. To like something like fun and active. So this is, I don't know if I get this right, he's a Detroit Lions punter. And he took action during Hurricane Harvey, and he pledged that for every retweet he would donate pet food to all the pets, because obviously in a hurricane, people escape, but the pets are left, and then they are hungry, and people need to care for them. So this got over 600,000 retweets. Is the second most retweeted athlete tweet of the year, and he is not Colin Kaepernick or LeBron James or one of these big guys that drive this. So some really amazing things can happen when you just take a stand. So people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, and this is even more so in this day and age. And so this is how brands have to start thinking differently about how they behave. So here's a really interesting Canadian example. I'm sure many of you saw this. So you remember that MEC, they were selling some products that had funding roots with the NRA. And a lot of Canadians, because this is a membership organization, they took to different social media channels, including Twitter, to call them out and say, you need to stop doing this. So this guy here, Pablo, this is about responsibility, a core value that has made me an unquestionable defender of MEC for more than 20 years. Responsibility to members, to the environment, to communities. So people got out and they tweeted these guys about this. And they said, thank you for the members who contacted us. Senior management will be discussing on Monday. We'll have an update for you later in the day. This is actually quite amazing. Like, a lot of people tweeted us, so now we're having a big meeting, and we're going to tell you we're having a big meeting, and we're going to tell you the time we're going to get back to you. 3 days later, an open letter to MEC members from the CEO, basically saying, you're right. This is what we believe in. This is who we are as a brand. This is what we want to stand for, and we will effectively immediately suspend any further orders with the 5 brands owned by Vista Outdoor, which we carry. That's actually really amazing in this day and age that they've made a major corporate decision on supply management in like a matter of days, given the crisis on social media. So that's amazing, and they were reminded about what they cared for and what their purpose was, and they took action on it, which is really admirable.
Do you know what the tampon tax is?
No, tax is the period.
It's just what makes tampons more expensive because you've got an added tax.
What do you think of that?
It's not fair on girls.
It's not even the money, it's just sort of the principle.
Tesco don't think it's fair. So what they're going to do is they have pledged to pay the tampon tax on behalf of their customers.
Wonderful.
That's quite shocking, in the best way.
Just values women more.
That's actually kind of surprising.
That's amazing. That makes me so happy.
So I bet you didn't think I'd be talking about tampons up here on stage. But so you've all figured out what the tampon tax is. Tesco's a UK supermarket. So for those of you who think, like, I don't have a sexy brand like Nike or Apple or Google or Twitter, you know, any brand can do this. This is a supermarket saying, actually this is not okay, that women who need these products are paying more than what they should be paying because there's an extra tax, which was dubbed the tampon tax. So they took action. They said, we're going to pay it for you. So these are small acts that they can do, and they obviously created this video, put it out on Twitter and in a number of other places, and told their consumers that they cared about them, they cared about women's rights, they cared about equality, they cared about people in lower income groups, and they did something about it. So I think like, if you don't have to be a big multinational global brand with $1 million spokespeople to do this. You can just take action on things that you care about, like MEC or Tesco. So Nike took a side. It's actually quite scary to take a side. A lot of brands would never do that. But it is possible to stand for something without taking a side. So MEC took a side in a way, but they really just said, we agree with the sentiments of our membership, that this is what we've always stood for, so we will just behave in a way that's consistent. So sometimes it's just easier to come out and just say, this is what we believe in. We're not arguing, we're not, you're wrong, I'm right. We're just telling you what we believe in. So here's a really good example. So some of you, if you raise your hands, if you saw this tweet from her, or you heard about this. So she's a new mom. She's also, kind of one of the most famous athletes in the world. And she missed her daughter's steps. And it's a very, I think one of the things that's really moving about this is that it's a really fundamental human experience from any mother, whether you're working shift work at the supermarket or you're going to your championship tennis match. Missing a key moment in your kid's life is tough. And so she took to Twitter and she said, I missed it, and I cried. And guess what happened? All these different people started to write her back saying, it's okay, you'll have thousands of magic moments, don't worry. Chrissy Teigen, she's practicing so you can see the real ones. It doesn't count till mommy sees it. Sort of. It doesn't count unless you catch it on your iPhone. I don't know. That's my theory. Anyway, so there's this outpouring of people talking to her about this and sharing in this fundamental human experience, which is a very sort of social media thing to happen, but quite heartfelt. It really sort of equalized all the different people that have these conversations. And so Gatorade, who is, obviously endorses her, they acted quickly, and they said she didn't return to greatness despite becoming a mother. She's great because she plays #like a mother, and they tag her. And let's watch. Oh dear. Okay.
You sacrificed like a mother. You pushed through the pain like a mother. You got back to work like a mother. You gave 100% without any sleep like a mother. You grew stronger like a mother. You found an extra gear like a mother. You battled. You showed them you never lost it. You created greatness like a mother.
Yes, Olivia, your dreams can come true too.
To be honest, that one gets me every time. I'm always like, okay, you're on stage, so pull it together. It's like a really great moment. They didn't take a side, they just stood for their athlete and stood for something universal, very meaningful, very powerful. And it's not really, there's nothing in there about actual Gatorade, but you remember it. So I think part of the challenge is the quick reaction. So this obviously happened in a spontaneous moment. They had to react quickly and get behind that. And that is one of the biggest challenges. But again, it goes back to if you already have established your product, your principles, and your pledge, then when these things happen, then you can engage. Okay, a couple more. Product. Heart disease, research and prevention. Principles. Awareness can save lives. Pledge. Drive action to fight back against heart disease. This one's a hard one. Probably no one will know, but anyone? Guesses? Okay. This is the BHF, the British Heart Foundation. So they don't have a lot of money, but they have a purpose, and they wanted to drive awareness because they think that solves it. So they did this really neat thing on Twitter. So they sent these tweets out. They promoted these tweets. You're on Twitter. Your heart stops. You go into cardiac arrest. Like this tweet to see what happens next. And just because I want to get the stats exactly right on this, like a third of people got it, like you survived. Most people got this. Sadly, most people got this tweet, help us fight back. You're unlucky. Nobody nearby knew CPR. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. It was a very visceral reaction to responses. So what happened? Well, let's see. 47,000 global mentions of the Restart a Heart across 70 careers. This is a heart foundation, a not-for-profit organization. So this isn't million-dollar spokespeople and big money. 26,000 total campaign likes. Lots of people unliked, so they could try again to see if they could get the survival message. So talk about driving a message home. 2,000 plus retweeted their personalized responses. So when they got the "you're unlucky," or for some of them they got the "you're lucky," they retweeted it and shared it out. Sorry, I thought there was one more. How do I go back? So really, really impactful. Really brought home like the actual experience and got out what they believed in and invited participation. And what they did find afterwards was that the participation rates in their courses around CPR did actually increase, and they were actually successful in driving more awareness and more prevention. So a really fun, kind of very tight campaign that had a big impact. Okay, let's talk about something that happened on Sunday. Everybody remembers that it was Remembrance Day on Sunday. So here's another way that you can get out in social media, notably on Twitter. So this was with the Veterans Affairs in Canada. They came to us to say, how can we make sure that people speak out and remember our veterans, especially on this 100th anniversary of the armistice in the First World War. So we created this conversation card, and it's a retweet to remind. So like to get a reminder of Remembrance Day and join the conversation on Twitter. So this tweet pre-composed a tweet just honoring our veterans, and then when you liked this tweet, it sent you a reminder on Remembrance Day. So this is what happened. I got this, L. Pearce, it's today's Remembrance Day. Take a moment to remember Canada's veterans, and Canada remembers. So just a nice way of kind of saying, okay, this happened maybe 2 weeks out, we're going to remind you, and we're going to ask you to join the conversation again. So that's their pledge, is just go out and post and say, we remember, because we're honoring our veterans. And sometimes conversations are so important to us at Twitter, and one of our goals is to really promote healthy conversations, so the Indigenous peoples, that here we are in this conversation. And so we partnered with them to take the conversation off of Twitter and welcome people in. So we took over Yonge and Dundas Square all day Sunday for a 24-hour takeover, posting sort of evocative images, reminding people of the sacrifices. We had a live tweet stream, so people tweeting Canada Remembers went live to the boards in real time, trying to find a way to actually tell some of the people all over the world that, hey, you never know, but your tweet was on here. 146,000 people passed through the square in a day, and your tweet was up there. And then we had an important sort of moment of silence where we just showed the poppy image for the 2 minutes of silence out of respect. So this is a co-marketing thing that we do with a number of brands to sort of take conversations that we feel are really meaningful or really spark conversation off of the platform and to welcome people in. The last one I'll leave you with, okay, see if you can guess this one. You guys should be able to guess this one. Product. They're a media and communication company. Their principles, we can help give a voice to people with mental illness. And their pledge is to end the stigma of mental illness. Bell Let's Talk. So did you know that in Canada, Bell Let's Talk is the most used hashtag of all time? So that is amazing. So the way that they've gotten out year after year, and this is an accumulation. Yes, they have dollars to spend, and yes, they're, massive communications company that has access to television and different mediums, but this is really just over and over every year, around the same day, the same time they commit this day, and the volume of that has been quite amazing. So for the hashtag's birthday in August last year, we named all the biggest hashtags of all time, and here's Claire Hughes, one of their biggest spokespeople. Bell Let's Talk is the most used hashtag of all time in Canada. It would be not possible without all your incredible efforts. So it is possible to get out and stand for what you believe in and make a difference. Whether you're a big company with lots of dollars, a small company with little dollars, but an important pledge and an important product, And you can take a side, you can just stand for something you believe in. There are so many different ways to do this. So a few tips before I leave on kind of how we would suggest you think about this. Oops. Sorry. Go back. So are you attuned to the tensions that your brand can address? So in all of the examples that I've shown, these brands really understood their consumers, understood what they cared about, and understood their role in it. And I think that's so important. It's important for a brand to get out and take a stand on an issue that is not going to touch them in sort of the day-to-day of how they interact with their consumers. So that is super important. Oh, why do I keep doing this? I pressed twice. Does your brand have a right or role to be here? So sometimes the heavy lifting has to be done first before you can really get out. So if Bell Let's Talk hadn't committed the way that we have seen them commit, it might be disingenuous for them to come out and say, we want to do this. So they have worked very hard to prove that they have a role and a right to be there. Are you doing or just saying? So most of these examples, there was an actual component of doing something that was different. So in Twitter's case, we built a stage, we engaged women. With the Tesco example, they actually did something, same with MEC. So it's important not to just say it, it's important to show and to show up and do it. And are all parts of your org fully aligned? So this is important because you can't go out saying we champion women's rights, but then everyone's like, oh, but do you have any female executives? And how's your pay equity rating? And how does this work? So you have to walk the walk, and you have to make sure that across the organization you can manage that. Because in social media, people will call you out very quickly on small things. And lastly, will this stand up 5 years from now? So I think Bell Let's Talk, they've proved that it stands the test of time. They've been doing it, I believe, at least 5 years, and I'm sure they'll be doing it for years to come. So it's important that you think about the longevity of the cause and kind of what it means for your brand. And that's it for me. I will take questions, I believe. And if you don't have any, thank you for your attention. There's like a weird glaring light, so I'll try to see. Does anybody have questions, comments, suggestions? You don't even have to ask a question. You can just give me some feedback, right?
I was going to say, straight up to the Me Too movement, how does it, when you're in the Twitter offices and you see a hashtag blow up and you see a conversation about what do you do? How do you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, one of the things that we really focus around is how can we help bring the conversation together? So what are the tools from a product perspective? So adding an emoji actually makes people a lot more likely to use the hashtag because it's visually recognizable for people who are reading. So if you follow the hashtag but you haven't tweeted yet, you see that there's the emoji. And there's a little bit of visual magic when you do it and it pops up. So actually, small things like us building emojis. So we built the Me Too emoji on our own. That's why we built the emoji for our Aboriginal History Month, just to kind of signal. And it signals to people this is an important conversation because it's marked on the platform. So that's one of the things we do. We do a lot of monitoring to understand sort of the tenor of the conversation. We talk a lot about healthy conversations. I know that there's probably a lot of you saying, well, Twitter, there's a lot of unhealthy conversations, and we do acknowledge that, but we are implementing product changes to try to prioritize healthy conversations. One of them is that you may see, when you look at a hashtag, you will often see, you scroll to a bunch of replies, and then they'll say the remainder of these replies have been hidden because of sensitive content. You can click the button and reveal those replies, but we've kind of given you a bit of we've deprioritized this stuff because we think it could be sensitive, and then you can opt in and opt out of that. So those are the types of things that we're trying to do when we see these heated conversations. Now that takes place across all conversations, but it's really about us managing in the background around how do we join them? How do we help it take space?
What are the key factors that cause a hashtag?
Well, there's a bunch of different things. I mean, it's basically an algorithm of volume and influence, right? So the number of tweets that are happening about that, but also the size of the follower base of the people who are tweeting about it. So it does help to have a Serena Williams or a Colin Kaepernick at the table because they have sizable followings and that plays into it. But you can see, like with Plain Full of Nasty Women, it just had a lot of volume, but probably not very many super notable, but because of the sheer volume of people tweeting it, it ranks to the top. And often what we see is hashtag, like, things don't trend. The reason we do takeovers in Young Dead Square for 24 hours is because stuff doesn't really trend, except for really large stuff, doesn't trend much beyond 24 to 48 hours. Because that's just how fast life happens on Twitter, which is all at the same time scary and fun. In the back? In the black sweater?
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yep.
In terms of the platform, where do you think Twitter is headed in the next few years, especially in comparison to other platforms on social such as Instagram? Is Twitter trying to not necessarily compete, but are you evolving? Are you trying some new things? What can we expect?
Sure. I mean, unbiased. Of course, we're going to kill them all. But anyway, don't record that. No, I mean, I think what Twitter has been able to do in, say, the last 2 to 3 years is really help people understand the difference between Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and Snapchat, and other platforms that you may use more regularly. But I think for a long time there was a perception around, well, why do I need Twitter because I have these others? And so what we've been really focused on is, what our mission is to fuel the public conversation. So we have really focused around tools and product changes and marketing that says we are a public platform designed to have conversation and events travel and be and have conversations beyond the borders of your traditional social circles. And we've really focused on that as a key differentiator for us. And that's why we've talked about Twitter's what's happening in the world and what people are talking about. Because you are using other social platforms to find out what's happening in your social circles. And if you're me, to share pics of your kids so your parents can look, and all those different things. And there's value, there's different places in your life for all the different social media, but we really talk about Twitter as a look at that public platform, when we think about other social platforms as a look at me, more private. And that's not a knock, it's just a really different way for us to get out there. And so I think you'll see us really focused on that and talking more about how we fuel that public conversation. And we really believe, and although it's often hard, sort of a core principle of our brand is that we believe that the conversation will lead to positive change, even if in the moment that conversation is negative. So that is why we will let conversation happen on our platform. We are more hands-off than some other platforms, and that is controversial, but it is part of what we believe to be the right value, is that the conversation will drive the change, not us managing that conversation. Yes, in front here.
Is there any internal dialogue at Twitter that it's the platform of choice for the president to kind of spread?
There is a lot of dialogue about that. I think, back to what I said, I think at our core, we fundamentally believe that hashtags around women's marches on Washington and the Me Too movement and other things are more powerful than silencing one voice who will find another place for their opinions. And so, yes, it's hard, but we are not the arbiter of who can speak. And we really believe that at our core. And we believe that the best way to counteract that, we talk about counter speech a lot, is for people to speak back against some of the commentary that's happening. And I know that not everybody agrees with that, but it a little goes back to that is our core principle, and we need to live that in how we show up in the world.
Sort of a follow-up. Early days Twitter was a much different place. And it's fair to say that probably over the last couple of years there was a lot of negativity on Twitter. It's famous for Twitter sales. And a lot of negative accounts. But in relation to hashtags, the other thing that tends to happen is people, I think we're hijacked, but they tend to take over hashtags negatively.
Yes.
So maybe talk a little bit about hashtags are great, but when other people start to take over.
Sure. So I think The comment I made earlier around how we're deprioritizing what we consider to be unhealthy replies. So this goes back to, we're not going to completely arbitrate that. We are going to remove stuff that clearly violates our policies. And I know that sometimes, just think about how nuanced this is. When you think about, if I send a tweet and it's like between me and my friends and I call her a biatch. Like, and we're laughing, ha ha ha, LMAO, but other people are like, not cool, kind of rude. Like, where is the moment when you're like, that one is mean and that one is a joke? This word means that in this context, but it means that in the other context. So context is really important here. So I know that there are moments when you're like, Twitter, what is your problem? Please take that down. But you have to consider that there's 320 million accounts, and we're trying to parse through context, and we're also trying to honor our own principles of not completely arbitrating the experience. So, but the functionality like deprioritizing unhealthy replies is part of what we're doing. We've also eliminated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of what we consider to be bot accounts.
Just as a follow-up.
Sure.
In the sort of the hashtag, so a brand, I mean, this is, I'm one person, so if somebody takes my hashtag poorly, it's unfortunate, but not going to have a huge impact. But if you're a brand, doing a brand campaign, all of a sudden, I think it's happened to McDonald's in the past. So how do you, maybe work with a brand to I hate the words mitigate, but try and manage that? Because sometimes Susan Boyle's hashtag a few years ago was famous for being inappropriate. Somebody clearly didn't think that through. But so in that way, when hashtags are meant for good, but can go horribly wrong, what kind of advice?
So I think on the product side, we're trying to let the product and the things that I've just talked about try to manage some of that so that the deprioritization will help a brand. I think from a pure, what's my advice for that, oh my God, my hashtag's been hijacked and this is going terribly wrong, we would suggest that you get out in front of it and you make a conscious decision. You either engage with the person who's being negative and shut it and try to sort of answer their issues. So it's sometimes like Rogers gets into this, where they try to advertise one thing and then 70 people are like, but my cell phone doesn't work. And they're like, oh Christ, how can we wait here? So they either need to get out in front of it and respond to those people proactively and quickly and try to at least say, take this to DM and I'll have this conversation with you in the case of like a service thing. And we often build DM automated customer service replies for people like Rogers, so they can go through like a DM form that's managed by an automated system that asks them what their issue is. Or we suggest that they ignore and try to drive groundswell of the people that they have engaged to talk about it. And I think most campaigns that you're doing, you should understand, like every single thing we ever do on Twitter, I have a very robust run of site. Or run of show. Who's going to tweet when? How many followers do they have? So you should not get out on Twitter and just like whack something out without having a bit of a plan around who's going to support you and how you're going to drive that volume. In front?
Just pure based on curiosity alone. Somebody who works for Twitter. How do you feel about Donald Trump?
Listen, I'll tell you that I do not like Donald Trump. People can, that's public. I don't like him. I think he's an idiot. I think, his views are terrible and I don't like him.
Has he been good for Twitter
Yay,
yet?
we don't like him. So, but I think the point really is, I don't think that silencing him is A, possible, and B, the right solution. You have to remember, just out of context, half of the American people voted for this person. Twitter is not in charge of who has control over nuclear weapons or who can make decisions around immigration. We are the messenger. You remember the expression, don't shoot the messenger? Well, there's a little bit of that in there around, and I don't mean to make light of a serious issue, but I think we fundamentally believe that if we say, okay, we're taking him off, but what if it was Barack Obama that someone who ran Twitter? Who knows who's going to be the CEO of Twitter in the future, and who knows what their views will be? And so, is it okay for us to just decide this person, unless they clearly violate? And unfortunately or fortunately, he has not violated our terms. He says things that are frustrating, that bother people, that are stupid, that are wrong, but that doesn't violate our policies, unfortunately. And so we believe that we are not the arbiter of that. We provide a platform and people can respond. I think it's the last question, yeah.
Okay, we can take
Yeah.
one
last one. And then you can all swarm me in the hallway about this issue.
To go in a totally different direction, what would your advice be to small to medium-sized businesses who've yet to build an audience on Twitter or yet to align themselves with a purpose? What would your advice be to them to best use this platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think my advice would be decide who are your consumers and what do they care about, and what kind of, like, it's almost like you need a run of show for like a 6-month publishing schedule. You need to think about what would we post about? What do people that follow us care about? And it doesn't, not every post has to be about your service or your business, but what kinds of articles would you retweet? What subjects are of interest to you? So I think about your publishing, think about what you would talk about if you were a person and you were this brand, and go out and create this account, start to retweet people that you think are good contacts for your brand, start to tweet moments with stuff that we curate that's the best of Twitter around topics that are of interest to the types of people that would follow your brand, and gradually just start to build your follower base. The best way to build a follower base is to retweet people, because then they see you and they say, oh, maybe you're interesting, I'll follow you. So I would just say, have a plan around what you want to publish and how you want to show up, and then implement that and be active. I would not post like once a month. I would have like a pretty good cadence of posting every few days at the very least. All right, well, thanks everyone.